Hello and welcome to My Way or the AI Way. I'm Scott Davison. I'm a business and marketing consultant and I'm on a mission to master AI. Now, I'm less than 2 months into this mission, but things are moving fast. For instance, last weekend, I was invited to do a presentation about AI for a conference for travel agents. I've been doing some consulting work for my brother's business, which is a travel agent, and as a result of that work, this speaking opportunity came about. And whilst I had a bit of imposter syndrome, I thought it's a really good opportunity. And the fact the conference was taking place on a cruise out of Sydney on a cruise ship, a 3-day cruise, made it too good an opportunity to pass up. So I wanted to share this story because it shows how this process works. Now, I've still got a long way to go before I would consider myself an expert in AI. But firstly, this demonstrates you only really need to be a few steps ahead of the next person in the room to be considered somewhat of an authority on a topic. But secondly, what I've learned is that the process of having to present or effectively teach a topic, it's a really great way to accelerate your own knowledge and deepen your own knowledge of the subject. So that's what I did. I put together a short presentation on AI, which I hoped was going to be of interest to the travel agents in the room. And it was really well received, which felt great. Now, it was only a short presentation. There were basically 3 slides on some basic tips for AI. But this is the interesting part. I split the presentation into 3 sections: beginner, intermediate, and advanced, because I figured there was going to be different levels of AI knowledge amongst the people in the group. But by far, the section that was of the most interest was actually the beginner section, the beginner slides, which shows a lot of business owners are only just getting started with AI. And even for those that are perhaps a bit further down the track, going back to basics can still be a really helpful process. So that's what I wanted to do today, was via this podcast, is to share the first section of that presentation, which was about how to write an effective prompt for AI. So here it is. I'm going to share the presentation with you. If you're watching on YouTube or the video on Spotify, you'll be able to see this. But if not, don't worry, I'll talk you through it. There's not a lot of words on the slides, and it's pretty simple, so you won't miss anything. As I say, the presentation was just some basic tips on using ChatGPT, but this could also be applied to any of the other AI models. And I started by sort of saying how to think about AI. This is an analogy I've seen used elsewhere, which is to think of AI as the world's best intern. So it's super smart, it's super keen to please you, perhaps too keen in some cases to please you. But much like an intern, you need to take some time to train it. And that's what I wanted to sort of talk through, is how to train your new intern. Now, one of the best ways to do that is to think about how you're prompting it. So what questions are you asking it? I'll split this up into 5 tips. First one is to give it context. So that's about telling it as much information as you can about what you're asking it to do. If you write a very simple prompt with not much context, you're going to get a very basic response. But if you give it some more context, much like an intern, it's going to do a better job. Rather than just write me an email for my clients, write a professional email for a travel agency promoting a new luxury tour to high-income retirees. Much more context, that's going to get a better result. The second point is to use examples of work that you like and provide those to it for context. You could take an email or a blog post that you've written in the past, or any example of your writing, upload that to ChatGPT and say, here's an example of how I write. I want you to write in this style. And you're likely to get something that's much more in your style rather than a generic, obviously AI generated piece of content. Alternatively, you may have someone else whose writing style you really like, maybe a competitor or maybe someone from a different industry, a blogger that you really like. You can actually take their post put that into ChatGPT and ask it to write more in that style. And again, you're going to get something that's a bit more customized to what you're looking for. Providing examples of what you like before you get started is a really good way to get a better result. The third point is that you can ask ChatGPT to assume a role or a persona. That helps give it context. Here's an example. You're an expert web designer. What are 3 improvements I can make to my travel agency website to increase conversion? First, telling it how you want it to behave as in this case, a web designer, or perhaps you want it to behave like a legal expert, or if there's particular personality traits you want it to have. You can ask it to behave in that way by giving it a role or a persona, and really helps to get a better result out of what you're prompting. The fourth tip, and this is probably the one I use the most, and the one I would say is my favorite tip, which is to tell it to ask you questions first. So much like a new employee or an intern, they often want to run off and get the answer. But if it just slow down and ask it to ask you some questions before it goes ahead, I've found this is a really great way to get much better results out of ChatGPT. And I'm now pasting this on the end of pretty much every prompt I put in, which is this statement here. I'll read it out to you. This or something similar will work. Before you start this task, is there anything else you would like to know to be able to do your job better? Stick that on the end of your prompt, and yeah, you'll be quite amazed. It actually comes back with some really intelligent questions and finds a way to gather information that perhaps you hadn't thought was important, that can really help it to provide a better response. Asking it to ask you questions before you get started is a really great way to get better results out of ChatGPT. And the fifth tip was about iterating and refining. So this is about breaking the prompt up into smaller steps. Often if you do a really long prompt, AI can find that hard, whereas if you break it up into steps, it gives you an opportunity to refine it as you go along. Maybe first step is give me Instagram post ideas for my travel agency. Then now can you make those posts more engaging? Put a question on the end. Now can you make them sound more fun and adventurous? And you can just go through this process of iterating, refining, and breaking it up into steps in order to get a much better result. So they were the 5 tips I shared at the beginner level. And as I say, it was really well received. There was a lot of questions on how to do that, and a lot of people felt they were going to go away and take that. So I thought, okay, this is something I'm probably going to use again. Let's make it into an acronym. All good models need to be an acronym. This is what I was able to come up with based on what I had, which was CERCS: context, examples, role, question, steps. CERQS. Not bad, not particularly memorable. So in the theme of the show, I thought, let's challenge my acronym and see what AI can come up with. And I gave the same question to ChatGPT. Here's the 5 steps. Can you help me come up with a memorable acronym? And this is what ChatGPT has come back with, which is obviously much better. CLEAR, CLEAR. So I think this is what I'm going to use going forward. I don't know if this is being used elsewhere. It's probably hard to trademark something that a robot has come up with, but CLEAR. C is for context, give the model context. L is for like, show it examples of what you like. E is for expectations, which is a bit broader than just giving it a role, but I really like this. Give it a role, but set it really clear expectations and boundaries of what you're looking for. A is for ask, so let it ask you questions before it starts. And R is for refine, breaking the prompt up into steps and refining as you go. So that's the new model, CLEAR, clear. Hopefully that makes it easier to remember. Okay, so those are my 5 tips on how to prompt like a pro. I hope you found those interesting. That ends this episode of My Way or the AI Way. I might cover some of the more intermediate and advanced tips in future episodes, but for now, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a review, follow the show, and share it with your friends. I'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, thanks for joining me on this journey to master AI. I'm Scott Davison, and this is My Way or the AI Way.